So what's the Chinese perspective on this?
As it has been ever since Deng Xiaoping started capitalism with Chinese characteristics. We do not want a war. We will beat you without a war. We are going to beat you technologically. We're going to beat you culturally. We're going to beat you militarily. We're going to beat you every dimension of power that you can imagine. And this latest edict by Xi Jinping, which the American press has completely missed, as far as I can tell, he put out the latest in a series of edicts that have come from Chinese premiers from Deng Xiaoping on. Hu Jintao was a little bit of an aberration. That's one reason they got rid of him. But Xi Jinping has been right in there. And this latest one says we are essentially triumphant in every element of global power but one. Now we're going to take on that one. And that one is financial control. And that means the renminbi being substituted for the dollar and everything from oil sales to you name it. It will become the transactional and reserve currency. Already is to a great extent for about 40% of the world. They're going to shoot for 60 to 70% of the world. They're going to drive the Bretton Woods system back where it came from. They're going to eliminate SWIFT. They're going to eliminate our ability to sanction countries. That's one of their major purposes. And that's an altruistic purpose for them. They think eliminating our ability to put sanctions on other countries in the world, through which, since the turn of this century, we have killed 38 million people, mostly men, women, and children. 38 million people. That rivals Stalin's purges, Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. It almost rivals Hitler in terms of the people that he killed directly in World War II. Not the whole war with 100 million casualties, but certainly the people he killed directly. So we're looking at the United States, and China looks at us this way, as having done that damage in the world with our financial system, which allowed us to put primary and secondary sanctions on 30% of the world. Go to OFAC and see how many countries we have under sanction. It's incredible. And these sanctions kill men, women, and children over time. We killed 500,000 in Saddam Hussein's Iraq when we had the sanctions on him. Madeleine Albright said when she was confronted with that statistic, so what? It was worth it. Madeleine want to join Hillary in the world of cretins? She did.
Yeah.
This is a serious issue for China, and they want to stop it.
It's also a moral stand on the United States. And just jumping ahead, it strikes me that once the U.S. government, OFAC, loses the ability to sanction other countries, it will have only the power to sanction American citizens for disobedience with programmable digital currency, and it will do something very similar to us.
Bingo.
That does seem like,
a natural follow-on.
Well, it does seem like the things you do to your opponents abroad will be done to your own citizens by the same government.
Yes.
I mean, that seems like a pretty consistent lesson of history. So that's why empires are bad, because they're bad for your own population. But I wonder, like China, we see our competition with China in primarily military terms. I think that's what we talk about in public. No one ever talks about the relative size of the economies. It's like, how many aircraft carriers do they have?
But that's new. That's new. In my administration, in George W. Bush's administration, Colin Powell was given his head on only one major international issue, and that was China. And I was there when George W. Bush said its importance to Walmart meant Dick needed to stay away from it. And he meant that. He meant that we were in strategic economic competition with China. And he didn't mind that because he thought we were better than they were at capitalism. And we should certainly hold our head up in the world in that regard. So he gave Colin Powell his head. And Powell was constantly thwarting the vice president in those terms because Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney wanted a hot war or a cold war, they'd have preferred the latter, with China. And Bush didn't want it, so he turned Colin loose on Taiwan in particular and wound up at the end of his first term having to repudiate Chen Shui-bian publicly and tell him to shut up about his independence referendum and get off that kick because he knew that was a red line with Beijing. So that's the last president I think we had who understood fundamentally this economic relationship and thought that we could wage it with them and at least tie them, if not win.
The impulse to go to war with China, like in exchange of ballistic missiles, at least, where does that come from? Why would you want that? Why would Dick Cheney and Rumsfeld and so many others be advocating for that?
I don't think they really wanted a hot war, but the thing that scared me and scared Colin Powell too was that they seemed to be willing to accept it if they couldn't get the Cold War. But what they really wanted was a replacement for the Cold War that would put the same pressures on us that the Cold War did, and that would be good in their sense. Cheney occasionally would reveal things like a statement: "We don't want people to love us; we want people to fear us." And that was okay, but it didn't go over that big with, I think, a genuine Christian, genuine Christian, a Sermon on the Mount type Christian that George W. Bush was. And so, in that sense, that pushed him over into Powell's camp. But they wanted that Cold War for sure because they thought, judging from their experience for their whole lives virtually, that was the only way to keep the empire in power and in check domestically and internationally, is to have that huge pressure on them all the time. And it was also the only way for Halliburton and Lockheed Martin and a host of others whom Dick loved and Don loved to make a lot of money.
But why? What do you mean when you say a Cold War would be the only way to keep the empire together internally? What does that mean?
You need an external enemy. If you've ever read, maybe you're too young, but there's there was an argument over whether it was a fanciful parody from somebody at the New Yorker or was it a serious study. It was called the Report from Iron Mountain. It was a pamphlet. Lyndon Johnson, when he said it, when he read it, told his staff to get rid of it, ban it. It didn't happen. The New York Times picked up on it. It went viral. 2 issues were put out. In that report, which many thought really was a response to Kennedy's June speech at American University,
yes,
they said impossible. In that report, they went through all the Cold War parameters and such, and they said impossible. You can never have peace. The only way an empire like the United States of America can survive is to have a constant threat. It must have a threat in order to survive. They did say at the end that if you could dream up some other way of creating the same kind of pressure that sort of threat did, and they even said religion used to do that. The monarchs, the prince, the prelate, they used to threaten the people with God. And that pretty much kept them in line. You're going to burn in hell if you don't do what I tell you to do, that sort of thing. Torquemada looking at the Muslims and saying, repent, become a Christian, or I'll cut your throat. And that's what he did if they didn't repent. Many of them repented. You could have that, but they thought that was passé, that kind of threat wouldn't do the sort of thing that an actual state threat would do. And so their conclusion was Kennedy was nuts. You needed that kind of external threat to keep a country as variegated, as diverse, and as ultimately powerful as America was in check.
Wow, it is so crazy that they would do that. I mean, for the most part, that actually works even today, where you see even with the war in Iran, you probably have a friend that's like, they have nuclear weapons. We need to be there. And that's crazy to think that that's how you keep pretty much people in check, paying their taxes and staying in line. But it works. I know that for sure that works. But even crazier than that, to think that all the sanctions that we do have on other countries, if they're just able to switch the currency, how quickly that would change. And it's funny, when I was younger, I used to always think that, what if these guys everybody just teamed up and wanted to take out America? But that was it's kids thinking. But financially, that could work. If we're financially, our money's not even, around the world, it's not it doesn't hold any value. Well, then we're screwed. So, and the sanctions are pretty much relieved. If we were to go to war in China, would be insane. But yeah, man, these crazy times right now. The fact that we're even talking about this is insane. But yeah, like, follow, subscribe.